Good afternoon. Welcome to Cannabusinesses Live. I'm Travis Copenhaver. I'm joined today with Jennifer Domingue. Today our show topic is going to be on some common mistakes cannabis businesses are making as they prepare for their inspections. We're going to get into that after today's news.
So for today's news, the FDA has issued 3 warning letters against certain members of the CBD and cannabis industry for basically issuing statements of treatment that these products can treat the certain conditions. They might be able to cure certain conditions, and that CBD has basically had some sort of scientific evidence or research to back up their claims. And so the FDA has issued 3 warning letters reflecting concerns about the statements that they're making, mostly on their websites. And I think this is the first time we've really seen the FDA wade into that crackdown, right, on CBD?
Yeah, and I think there was a lot of concern, because the news line was FDA cracks down on CBD businesses. And which isn't the best news to hear, but if you actually look into the facts and details of what was happening, the types of businesses they were targeting, and there were only 3 of them, CBD right now is in a pretty gray area, unfortunately, as we're waiting for rules and regulations to be drafted at multiple levels of government. And there are a lot of CBD businesses right now that have products out there on the market, and these were some of the examples, maybe some of the claims being made being a little too far for comfort level as we're in this transition period. Mm-hmm. So, it's not a good thing. We'd like to see more information about the best way to operate a business in that market. But when you look at the type of cease and desist letter that went out, I'm not super concerned about its impact on the CBD industry as a whole. I
would agree with that. I think it's also important to note that when you are marketing something as a food item or a supplement, you have to be cognizant that these things are going to be regulated by the FDA if it's something that is meant to be ingested. So if you have something like nutrition facts on your packaging, that's a red flag to them that is meant to be ingested, right?
Exactly.
That's something that we need to be aware of when we're marketing our products.
Right, and it actually is going to speak pretty directly to our main topic today, which is, if you're saying something and you're putting yourself out there, it's going to have potentially some implications. Mm-hmm. So
I would 100% agree with that. I also think that it speaks volumes that it was, they pulled a lot of quotes from their website. So even if you've been licensed and you're meeting your actual inspections with the state or municipality, what you write on your websites is of the utmost importance as well.
Right, and we've seen that kind of be a discussion topic in some board meetings, over the last few months as well. So, we'll definitely keep an eye on the situation, and if that, we hear more action from the FDA, I'm certain we'll be talking about it again.
Another issue that we have on the federal level is the Safe Banking Act. The Safe Banking Act, as we discussed last week, has passed out of committee and is now pending a vote on the House floor. Right now, we haven't seen much movement on the House floor, but we are anticipating that will go up for a vote in the relatively near future, and we're expecting it to pass on the House level, correct?
Yeah, so it's not going to go very quickly, but it's still doing what it needs to do. It passed through committee. It's now eligible for the House floor. Some of the experts that I've been following, to follow that news article, are predicting that it's reasonable to see maybe that bill seeing more action again sometime towards the end of the summer session. So hopefully sooner than that, but we'll certainly be following it, and so far so good on that bill. So.
Yes. And a little bit closer to home, we do have temporary restraining orders issued by the Michigan Court of Claims against the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs for trying to enforce their shutdown day for temporary operators. As we know, temporary operators have been an ongoing concern and maybe a thorn in the department's side for the last couple of months as they've been trying to shut down temporary operators and move into fully licensed facilities only. However, there have been concerns about meeting the patient's needs and making sure that there's enough supply to meet that demand. So right now, we are seeing a TRO that has been entered, and there is a hearing date set for April 9th so that we can kind of get more information from the court as to whether or not that shutdown will be enforced.
Right, so more on that next week, I'm sure.
Yes.
Anything else this week?
I think that's it for the news today. Thank you.
Great. All right. So our main topic today, as we see more and more of these businesses getting past pre-qualification, obtaining their local approvals, the last big step for license acquisition is having the inspection of your facility with LARA. And as we've had the opportunity to go through more and more of that with our clients and hear about how that process has gone with some of our colleagues and some of the other businesses that we have business dealings with, we're starting to see some trends and some common mistakes. And we just want to talk about, like, high level what the inspection process is and how you can be prepared for it so that you have a successful inspection. So the reason we kind of brought this up as our topic this week, LARA basically has issued have they switched to marijuana regulatory agency yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. The Bureau of Marijuana Regulation has issued some inspection, basically outlines or guidelines for what their inspector is going to be looking for when they come into your facility to inspect you in the facility application or the step 2 or the last thing you do with LARA. And it's nothing, there's no real new information in there, but it is a useful outline of what an inspector is going to be doing, what they're looking for in your facility, and it basically helps you determine what you need to be prepared for, to have a successful inspection. And it's pretty much just a summary of the rules from the regulations. And, so the main thing that we'd like to bring to your attention is know what the rules and regulations say and be prepared to meet and address every one of those issues. But beyond that, how do you be prepared? What are some of the main things you can do knowing an inspection's coming, knowing LARA is going to come into your facilities so that you can have a successful experience and move forward toward your final license?
It comes down to a very simple premise. Read your narratives. Mm-hmm. You had to submit a set of narratives with your step 2 licensing application. You had to submit narratives about your facility plan, your staffing plan, your technology plan, inventory and record keeping. You had to submit detailed narratives to the state saying you're going to do X, Y, Z, and here's how you're going to meet and exceed all of those rules set by the state. You should read those because these are the things that the state is going to come in. They're going to know what your narratives say. They're going to have already primed themselves for this inspection, and they're going to be looking to make sure that you match up with everything that you wrote. So be familiar with those. I think that that's really the core here.
If you take nothing else away from this video, like, that is the thesis statement.
Yes.
And I tell people this all the time when they're coming into my office for the first time, when they're looking at a license acquisition project. What are the 3 steps? Well, we know the first 2 pretty well. You need a local license for your location. You need pre-qualification for your facility. You need your company to, be eligible for a license, and then you need to have your facility ready. And what is the main deliverable for that facility besides building it? You're going to have your standard operating procedures, your SOPs, your narratives, all of the things you put in those last 7 pages of the application: staffing plan, facility plan, technology plan, etc. Well, how do you put those plans together? First and foremost, they need to meet and demonstrate a program that's going to be a compliant program, but then they also need to be customized to your business and customized to your business's location, which is great. That's what we help our clients do. But what they don't, what you need to appreciate is the end product. What that document says is effectively your promise to the state of Michigan of what you're going to do. I like to focus on the security plan. That's one that makes the most sense.
Yes.
So in your security plan, you're going to, in exhausting detail, explain how every room of your facility is going to meet every rule and regulation imparted upon you by this law so that you can be a compliant provisioning center or a compliant cultivation facility or compliant whatever you are. So LARA's going to come in. They're going to have your security plan in their hands. You're going to, let's say this is the room you're in, right? Okay, there's plants in this room. There needs to be a camera on those plants. You said the camera's going to be in the corner over here. Okay, is there a camera there? Right. You said it's going to be this kind of camera. Is it that kind of camera? Does it have the correct pixels? Can it recognize my face from a certain distance? Like, all the things the rules tell you need to do, they're going to go room by room and make sure you're doing them. And less specific than that, your facility has, a basic layout with limited access areas, restricted access areas, with places where things are supposed to be. You know, you have a place where your security equipment and storage needs to be, where your safe and things need to be. And it's very common when you move from the plan to the implementation of that plan that maybe there's some little things that have changed along the way, right? So if you're not updating those issues, or if you're just, you know, if you didn't take the time to compare what your facility actually ended up looking like with what your plan said and accounted for those discrepancies, then you might have some challenging questions when the inspector is asking you where things are and why they're set up this way, right?
I'm glad that you brought that up. Another key thing that is important when you're talking about security, or really any other area of your inspection, is if you're not sure how something works, if you're not sure how to obtain the security camera footage, to pull it up for the LARA inspector if they should ask. If you're not sure on how to move a camera the way that they want, you're going to want to make sure that you get in touch with your security company or your security guy or your guard or whoever you have as your point person to come out there, and if they can't be present for the actual inspection, then at least have a meeting before the inspection to go over how to do all these things. Get a refresher course just so you can talk articulately and intelligently about your security setup. And that goes for anything beyond the security. Do it with your third-party integrator. Make sure that you can understand and explain your third-party system to the inspectors. Also, make sure that if you're a high-level individual and you don't really know the ins and outs of your point-of-sale system, for example, but you've got a floor manager who is spot on with this, or you have a really great cashier, you know, provisioning center, bud tender, somebody who uses that system every day, make sure they're there for that inspection and they can talk with the inspectors as well.
Which is our next point. Have your team there,
yes.
right? This inspection is very important, you know, because it's one of the things you need to do and need to pass in order to get your license. So you should treat it with that level of importance. And there's no shame, you're not expected to know everything, but your group as a whole is expected to know everything. If you're going to be able to operate a compliant facility, you need to be able to demonstrate that compliance to the person whose job it is to ensure that you are compliant, right? So, you know, and again, understand who's supposed to know that information, because your staffing plan, your operation plan, your facility plan, they're all telling, okay, well, here's our floor manager. Our floor manager is responsible for X, Y, and Z. That's Bill. Here's Bill. If Bill doesn't know his job, you're going to have a problem.
Right.
Right? So understand before your inspection is even going to happen, what are everyone's roles? What are your responsibilities? Is everyone comfortable with those roles and responsibilities? Can they demonstrate that knowledge at your inspection? Right? So, and that moves us on to, you know, a pretty important factor that's not just specific to the inspection, but just in general, implement your plan. Implement these narratives. You know, it's very important, you know, the reason the state of Michigan makes you submit your standard operating procedures and narratives for review is so that the state has a level of certainty that you're going to be operating a compliant facility, which, you know, if you're effectively making the promise that you're going to do something in a certain pattern and practice, you need to be doing it. So it is in your best interest to live and die by the plan that you've presented to the state. And you're not wanting to be the type of business that's in a position to, okay, let's tighten everything up. We know an inspection's happening in 2 days. Stop cutting all the corners. You already have a problem. You know, just because your inspection is going to have schedule sometimes, LARA and law enforcement officers have the right to access your facility without notice. So if you get in the habit, if your team is in the habit of kind of falling out of line with, you know, what you're supposed to be doing in your operation, you're going to only be setting yourself up for failure, you know, when something unexpected happens, like, hey, look, it's an unscheduled inspection. Because remember, getting the license is step one. Keeping the license is what's going to matter. So if you're not in the pattern and practice of actually following and implementing those rules and regulations, it's probably going to be difficult for you to explain what they are, how they work, right?
Absolutely. Basically, going back to knowing what's in your narratives and then living and breathing by them. We don't want you to be in the position of overselling your business and under-delivering on the result, right? Everybody is very familiar with that phrase, you under-promise and over-deliver. But that doesn't really apply when you're trying to win pre-qualification status, or you're trying to get a license with the state. Everybody wants to put together the best, most impressive package to the state possible when they're trying to get these cannabis business licenses. However, if you're going to promise the state the moon and then you just kind of can't give them much of anything, you've got major issues. They are going to come expecting to see these things. So we want to make sure that we're realistic when we're doing the narratives and that we meet every point in those narratives.
And again, like, you know, that's why well before you are in a position where an inspection is going to be occurring, you know, when you're designing this package for the state, when the state's reviewing it with you, it's important to be thinking about, you know, just because the state tells me I need this, you know, that's great. You know, you do need this. But you're also going to have to design a set of packaging, you know, your narratives, your standard operating procedures that are going to set you up for success, right? You don't want to have your security plan be so expensive to implement that it just makes it impossible for you to actually comply with. Because one of two things is going to happen. You either need to comply it so you don't run a successful business because you don't make any money, or you're not making any money so you stop complying with it, and now you're going to have an inspection issue, you know, if you get caught cutting those corners. So designing your plans and narratives to make sense is incredibly important. And then if you've done that correctly, it's important to make sure everyone's following those plans, and that's how you pass your inspection, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, that's all well and good. An inspection happens, you can't account for the unknown. What happens if we start having an issue? Like, what happens if an inspector finds something, you know, out of line, right? What's kind of the process there?
I would say your biggest asset in a situation like this is communication. We want to make sure that we're communicating with the department every step of the way. And not only are we going to follow up in a kind and courteous and thankful manner, saying thank you for pointing out all of these issues, we'll be happy to fix it. Please come on out tomorrow or the next day. We'll have everything fixed. You know, I just have to get my team out here to change a few things around. You know, stop in whenever you want next week. You know, like, we'll be around. We're happy to answer any questions. Follow up with an email, letting them know that you have, you know, you're documenting this. You know that these are the changes that need to be made, and that these are the action steps you're taking to rectify that situation.
Definitely, and you know, demonstrating a willingness to learn. You know, everyone recognizes law as examiners. You know, they're doing this a lot of times for the first time. The industry continues to evolve. You know, rules and regulations are continuing to be polished up and implemented. So, you know, luckily, if you're in this first wave of businesses taking advantage of this opportunity, there is going to be some give and take on, you know, developing how this process is going to play out. But understand, compliance is going to be incredibly important to the life of your business from day one to the end. So, you know, you want to make sure that you are taking that to heart and setting yourself up for success. While you want to communicate with the examiners, while you want to communicate with Lara, you want to also make sure that, again, you're not promising on things you can't deliver, and that you're not you know, just saying anything they want to hear to get them out of the room. You know, you have to follow up with the commitments you're making, and you need to make sure that those commitments are reasonable for what you can actually pull off. So they need to be thought out. But, you know, if something bad happens, they find something, you know, the difference between demonstrating a willingness to correct and mitigate that from happening again and pretending it didn't exist is probably going to be what separates a business that sees success and one that doesn't. All right, so that said, that's all fine and good. What are some, like, actual expectations, some examples of things we've seen happen to some of the groups we've been working with?
You know, when you are talking with somebody and they say, pay attention because there will be a quiz at the end of this, that's how an inspection kind of occurs, where they will go through everything and then they kind of test you along the way. We've seen issues where an inspector might ask you to pull up something in metric and then confirm that it's on the shelves, or making sure that certain records are where they're supposed to be and are easily accessible, and you know how to pull them and show them for an inspection.
Yep. So they're going to review your visitor logs,
yes,
to see if you've been using them correctly. And, you know, while this probably isn't happening yet, you know, we can look to how inspections occur in other industries. You know, what happens in the alcohol industry? They send in people that you might not know are examiners to see if you treated those people the right way. It's the equivalent of the underage person walking in and trying to buy alcohol, you know, and you're either going to have an issue or not if you treated that situation the right way. It's going to be very similar. Where luckily in the new stages of things, there's a little bit of leniency as we all kind of get this industry up and running, but the penalties, as we've discussed several times with our clients, can be incredibly significant. And they're only going to become more and more strict as the industry is expected to know exactly what is expected of them. Because everything is in, you know, fresh, everything's case of first impression, people are all doing this for the first time on every side of the equation, you know, there's going to be a little bit more give and take. But if you've been told you need to correct something and then need to tell you again, you can expect there to be some issues, right?
Right. Some fines, some penalties.
Exactly.
They're definitely going to be making note of that, so we want to make sure we avoid that. Other things that I've noticed that have been brought up in inspections are things like making sure that you've done your background checks on your employees. You're supposed to do a background check and keep the results of those background checks for every single employee that you have at your facility.
And remember, your employee cannot have a felony in the last 10 years. And if you want to hire someone that does have a felony in the last 10 years, you can only do so with the regulator's permission. So what they want to see, you know, proof that they don't have a felony in the last 10 years. What kind of background check did you do, right?
Right.
Some other examples would be, you know, metrics indicating that you had some waste in the last couple of days. Like, show me how you handled that waste. Did you deal with it correctly? You've already mentioned, you know, pulling up a product that's listed in your possession and metric and verifying where it's at to confirm that, you know, you're handling and storing it correctly. You know, most of the inspections we've been seeing have been on the provisioning center side of things because if you're paying attention to the licenses that are issued, it's mostly provisioning centers and grows. So, you know, as we get more and more information, you know, you're going to see the regulators see common mistakes happening over and over again, and they'll be a little more clear about the types of things they're looking for because they don't want you to fail either. They want to see a compliant facility. They want to see a business that's operating under the scope of the law, and they want to weed out the businesses that are unwilling to do that.
I think that's pretty much it in a nutshell. We want to make sure that if we have any issues, that we are documenting these and we're communicating these at every level with the department. One of the more recent issues that we saw was we had a client who had an issue with a third-party integrator, and it wasn't relaying certain information to metric. And they had talked with the third-party integrator, but it still didn't fix the problem with metric. And because they had documented correspondence showing that they were trying to resolve this issue, that saved them a lot of grief at this inspection. And that's something that we want to make sure that everybody's doing, is document when you have an issue. Reach out to the department, let them know that you're working on this, and it'll save you a big headache later.
Right. A couple other things that might pop up, right? So there's a big difference between, you know, having a group of your stakeholders march through the pre-qualification process and then getting a few months later to the point where your business is ready to get up and running, right? Well, remember who's supposed to be on your pre-qualification. You know, owners, that's easy, but it's also people in positions of management and control. And what type of management and control? Well, that depends on what their roles and responsibilities are. So, you know, if you have 3 people as the stakeholders for your pre-qualification and you're ready for your inspection, and those 3 individuals, you know, clearly aren't the ones calling the shots and don't know what's going on, and these other people that haven't been disclosed to Laura are the ones that are saying and doing everything, you might be raising some red flags about who's truly calling the shots here. And as we've all seen in the pre-qualification conversations the board's had over the last few months, strawman operations, you know, concern over who's truly at benefit here are the things that our government is going to be concerned about. So you have to live and die with what was presented to the state. If 3 people are the ones who are supposed to be in the positions of control and management, those 3 people have a responsibility to be overseeing the way you're operating this facility. So make sure that you're playing in the bounds that you're able to, you know, present in. If you need to have a new person, you know, fill one of those positions, you should be putting that person through the pre-qualification process as well, informing Laura, okay, we hired Bill. Bill wants to be our facility manager, and he's going to be given a level of responsibility that would require him to be pre-qualified. So, you know, work with your regulators. They are understanding of that. They understand these businesses are dynamic, they're growing, they're merging, they're partnering. But what you don't want to do is just assume that you can move one of your employees into an elevated position without the regulator's approval. So, you know, a couple other issues that might pop up. Anything else you can think of?
Yeah, one just last thing, I think a takeaway is practice. Practice having an inspection. And it doesn't have to be anything super exhaustive, but walk around and have, there's these nice little checklists right here that were given by the state, and they have everything that they're going to be looking at. And just walk around and make sure that you're in compliance. Test your employees, make sure that they understand their duties and their responsibilities. And if you can do that, great. If you wanted like a more realistic experience, there's entities, there's law firms that do have regulatory compliance, like fake inspections that you can hire somebody to come out and run through an inspection and go over the results. How can we make this better? How can we run a tight ship here? And that's what we're looking to do, right? We want to make sure that we can avoid as many issues as possible. So I think having a practice session, having a training afterwards with your employees, you guys did great on XYZ, here's what we need to fix, that will pay off in dividends.
And I think you'll find, like, if you look to other marijuana industries in our sister states, and as those industries have years of maturity on us, what separates a successful cannabis business from another? It's those that are capable of being highly compliant with the rules and regulations. And the inspection is your first bat at, am I a compliant business? You know, you want to set yourself up with a solid foundation, so know your plans and make sure those plans are setting you up for success. But compliance is about implementing those plans, not just what you've drafted for yourself, but the rules and regulations the state's putting upon you. And the best way to be able to do that is know what they are, practice, and then be willing to improve if issues come up, right? So that's how you prepare for a successful inspection. There's several other specific things that can come and go, but if you're taking that approach to it, you know, anticipate what is expected of you, be willing to demonstrate that you can meet those expectations, and then be willing to improve if things need to be shorn up, you're going to be a successful and compliant business.
I would agree with that.
So there you go. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We'll be back next week, probably with another fun show on an interesting topic. Always feel free to suggest if anyone has questions. I don't think we mentioned in the news, but this weekend, I think starting today, is Hash Bash in Ann Arbor. It will be the first Hash Bash where cannabis is legal, so it's expected to be a fun time. I'm sure you'll see a few familiar faces from our law firm hanging out on Saturday. We'd be more than happy to say hi, pull me aside, and let me know how your cannabis business is going, and we look forward to talking to you next week. So for Travis Copenhaver
and Jennifer Domingue,
we'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.